the Black press navigates discussing controversy while responding to racism and other issues that affect its target market. She will also discuss the publication's history and rich legacy on today, Wednesday, February the 9th, from 11:30 until 1 today. We are so very glad to have you today for our program. And at this time, I would like to introduce our speaker for the day. Our speaker is Denise Roloff Barnes. Denise Roloff Barnes is CEO and publisher of the Washington Informer, and she's an award-winning community newspaper that serves the African-American community in the Washington metropolitan area. In addition to this role, Roloff Barnes serves as the Washington Informer Charities, oversees the Washington Informer Charities, a nonprofit organization that promotes literacy and sponsors internship opportunities and writing competitions for students interested in pursuing careers in journalism. Ms. Roloff Barnes wrote for the Washington Informer while in middle school. She's a graduate of Howard University and the Howard University School of Law, where she became editor of the Barrister, the law school's student newspaper. Her father, Dr. Calvin W. Roloff Sr., founded the Washington Informer in 1964, 3 months after President Lyndon Johnson signed the Civil Rights Act. Her stepmother, Wilhelmina J. Roloff, a politician, attorney, and ardent civil and community activist, served on the Council of the District of Columbia. Ms. Roloff Barnes is president of the District of Columbia chapter of AARP and member of the board of the National Newspaper Publishers Association, the Black United Fund Incorporated, and she is actively involved with the District of Columbia's Black Public Relations Society Foundation, the Historical Society of Washington, D.C., and several other community nonprofit organizations. Her board memberships include Events DC, the United Black Fund, the Maryland Delaware DC Press Association, the National Newspaper Publishers Association, the DC Martin Luther King Holiday Commission, and the Commission on the 40th Anniversary of Home Rule. She is a member of Leadership Greater Washington and was inducted into the DC Hall of Fame. She's received numerous honors and awards, including the Chrysler Financial National Newspaper Publishers Association Foundation Entrepreneurial Award, which recognizes the nation's Black-owned newspapers for their entrepreneurial accomplishments and commitment to community service. Ms. Roloff Barnes is the executive director of the Washington Informer News, a bi-weekly television news program, and Let's Talk, the host of Let's Talk, a public affairs program, and the Reporters Roundtable. She has appeared on the Tavis Smiley Show, Tony Brown's Journal, NBC4's Reporters 9 Notebook, and several radio and television programs. Her personal stories are recorded and included in the History Makers, a digital repository for the Black experience. It is my pleasure to again introduce you to our speaker, and the next voice that you will hear will be none other than the voice of Denise Roloff Barnes.
Good morning. Trying to manage this technology here. It's a pleasure. Thank you so much for that gracious introduction. And I am really excited to be with you all today. Before I get started, I have to thank Regina Streety for this invitation to speak with you today. When she reached out to me in December and told me that she wanted me to be your Black History Month speaker, I really thought she had the wrong person. I listened, as I just listened to that bio even, to her glowing description of me and my work, and thought, I'm sure she's not speaking to the right person. But the emails kept coming, and she convinced me that I would be great and that I had a profound message to share. So that's what I prepared for you today. And I want to thank you so much, Gina, and all of the rest of you who have put this program together, Wendy, as well as Lisa. Thank you so much for your hard work. and for helping to raise my confidence at least 1,000%. This one's for you. I also want to take a moment to recognize your Governor, Roy Cooper. I learned a lot about North Carolinians from reading his proclamation. And not only should you be proud, but Black Americans and all Americans should be proud of the contributions to the field of STEM that emanated from this state and the record number of HBCUs whose graduates are leaders in science, technology, engineering, and math. Governor Cooper has proven to be a forward thinker, demonstrated by his words in that proclamation that not only reflect on past contributions, but what must be done in the future to ensure equity among those in the field of STEM. In the proclamation, he wrote, whereas this year's theme, science and environmental justice, aims to address the need for transparency and equity in how government and corporate decision makers affect underserved communities, and recognizing that all people have a right to clean air, clean water, clean soil, and a stable climate, and deserve an opportunity to participate fully and meaningfully in decisions that affect their living environment. He noted that African Americans have long been advocates in the Warren County, North Carolina community, and sparked the contemporary environmental justice movement in 1982. And African Americans in North Carolina, he wrote, remain vocal advocates for environmental and climate justice and diversity, equity, and inclusion in STEM. Now, I have to say, I'm proud to say that I'm a friend of someone who is credited for being the father of the environmental justice movement. And that is none other than the Dr. Benjamin F. Chavis, chairman of the National Newspaper Publishers Association, with whom I served when I served as chair of NNPA. But more importantly, Dr. Chavis is a proud native of Oxford, North Carolina. And you may recall that he is a member of the Wilmington 10, who your former governor exonerated or pardoned those members several years ago. So I'm already feeling the spirit of the place as I sit here in my office in Southeast in Washington, D.C., and speak to you through this Hollywood square. Still, I have come to admire North Carolinians and hopefully share your pride in this great state. And speaking of Dr. Chavis and NNPA, I would be remiss if I didn't also acknowledge some of my fellow Black newspaper publishers in North Carolina. First, let me give honor to the late, great Mary Alice Thatch of the Wilmington Journal. Miss Thatch joined the ancestors in December, but her legacy lives on, and she will be remembered for her crusading efforts that led to the pardon of the Wilmington 10. A third-generation publisher who took over from her father, she wrote and spoke to issues that kept politicians honest and encouraged her readers to stay engaged in the movement for racial equity and justice. And other Black newspaper publishers include the Carolina Peacemaker, Carolina Times, the Carolinian, the Charlotte Post, the County News, Greater Diversity News, the Triangle Tribune, and the Winston-Salem Chronicle. I'm not sure if all of these papers are still active, but they were, and they continue to serve the communities in which, in the communities where they are. And of course, I would be remiss if I didn't mention their names. And I can proudly say that there are others that are on the grow in the North Carolina area. And I refuse to be offended by those who often ask, as we move to this issue or this month of Black History Month, that why do we need to celebrate or acknowledge a month called Black History Month? And many are so critical that it happens to come during the shortest month of the year. Well, I don't question the intentions of Dr. Carter G. Woodson, the founder of Negro History Week, but it's helpful to know that Dr. Woodson, who devoted his life to historical research and the preservation of our African American history, artifacts, and culture, chose the week between President Abraham Lincoln's birthday and Frederick Douglass's birthday in February as the period to celebrate Negro History Week. Dr. Woodson said it is not so much a Negro History Week as it is a History Week. we have a lot of folks to help to understand that as we talk about teaching Black history in our schools across this country. But Dr. Woodson went on to say what we need is not a history of selected races or nations, but the history of the world void of national bias, race hatred, and religious prejudice. Dr. Woodson's legacy lives on in the Association for the Study of African American Life and History, commonly referred to as ASALH, which he founded in 1915, and of which I presently serve as a proud member of its board of directors. And ASALH continues to publish the Journal of African American History, and they established the official theme for Black History Month, which this year is Black Health and Wellness. So let me give you a little backstory about me. I was born in Washington, D.C. In 1954. My father came to D.C. from Texarkana, Texas, and my mother came from Detroit, Michigan, by way of Holly Springs, Mississippi, where she was born. And that marriage didn't work out so well. A Southern Black man that grew up facing the realities of racism and injustice, who tried to carve out a life with a Northern Black woman who attended a predominantly white business high school that sent her off to DC to work in a job at the US State Department. Talking about different worlds. As I said, I was born in 1954, the year the Supreme Court declared the separate but equal doctrine, that it should be overturned, and the ruling that said that segregated schools was unconstitutional. My mother was thrilled. My father, a graduate of Prairie View University, felt victorious, but he was unimpressed. So I attended a Black nursery school, 4 Black elementary schools, a Black junior high school, a Black high school, and on to Hampton University, Howard University, and then Howard University Law School. The 1954 ruling gave my parents and gave me a choice, and we made our choices, and I'm proud of all of them. In 1964, long after my parents divorced, my father remarried to an angry Black woman, a lawyer from Portsmouth, Virginia. They put their dollars together to start the Washington Informer. There were already several Black newspapers in DC, and my father served as editor of one of them. But the Times demanded a publication that would force open the doors of opportunity for Black people across every sector in the nation's capital, a place that was still pretty segregated when my mother, and my stepmother moved to this city. The passage of the 1964 Civil Rights Act provided the ammunition, but the two of them, along with other like-minded community activists, including Marion Barry, our former mayor, Stokely Carmichael, and others who were intentional in using the new law to challenge the status quo. My dad looked around the city government and decided to publish a book called Know Your DC Government. It was innocent enough in its title, but as one skimmed through the pages, there was photo after photo of mostly white men who ran every agency that controlled the district. Weeks later, he published a front page story in the Washington Informer with a headline that read, DC government controlled by suburban white folk. Remember, his wife was a lawyer, and he wasn't afraid of anybody. It was then that the home rule movement began, and DC residents couldn't vote for anything, not even President of the United States. And it was one of the pillars of Dr. King's civil rights movement when he addressed the right to vote in his speeches when he visited the nation's capital. The Washington Informer was a messenger for the home rule movement, the civil rights movement, the equal employment movement, the end of violence by DC police movement, the affordable housing movement, the movement for quality education and access to healthcare movement. A name, that was just to name a few. And the Washington Informer under my father's leadership was at the forefront of every issue that attempted to open doors and to create opportunities for Black Americans and really for Black residents all over the city. And it continues to do so. I grew up as an only child, although I do have a brother and who lives in Kansas, and we're very close. But I found myself in rooms with people who were planning how to make the system more equitable. So when I got to Howard undergrad, much of what I learned early on was reinforced by my professors, who are also a part of the movement. I took journalism classes in the School of Communications with broadcast journalist Tony Brown, who was our dean. My instructors included Samuel Yett, the first Black correspondent for Newsweek magazine, who lost his job after publishing his book, The Choice, the issue of Black survival in America. Other professors included Wallace Terry, author of Bloods, an oral history of the Vietnam War by Black veterans, and Don L. Lee, also known as Haki Madhubuti, the author, educator, and poet, taught a class that I took called Black Thought. When I went to Howard Law School, attorney Wiley Branton, one of the members of the legal team of the Little Rock Nine, was a dean, and many of my professors were judges. I became editor of Howard's law student newspaper, and it was the occasion of the visit of Justice Thurgood Marshall, who dedicated the school's moot courtroom, that I finally caught the newspaper publishing bug. My father planted the seed at the Informer, but it was the barrister that made it grow. In 1994, when my father died, I knew I was ready to take over the newspaper. It was hard. It was extremely difficult. I was married by then with two young sons, 9 and 7 years old, and we were struggling financially, not only as a family, but the newspaper as well. My father often called the Washington Informer a weekly, WEAKLY, as opposed to what we were, which was a newspaper that came out every week on Thursdays. It was a struggle, but I refused to let it go. I almost did once when boxing promoter Don King expressed an interest in buying the Washington Informer. The price may have been the deal breaker for him, but his plan to change the name from the Washington Informer was a deal breaker for me. So here I am, 28 years later, still doing what I do, covering the news from the Black and positive perspective. Regina asked me, why is it that the Black press has escaped the scrutiny that so many other white-owned publications are facing? And how we manage to maintain the respect and trust from our readers? And Regina, you're not alone when you ask that question. The white press is trying to figure out as well, what is the Black press's magic sauce? The National Newspaper Publishers Association promotes a membership of over 200 Black-owned newspapers across the country. And some of the members, including the Amsterdam News, the Pittsburgh Courier, the Chicago Defender, and the Afro, which is our sister paper. I mean, we have a relationship. They're cover DC and Baltimore, are more than 100 years old. Many of the papers are still family-owned, like Mary Alice Gervais Thatch and the Wilmington Journal. The second or third generation publishers are carrying on the business. I might also add that nearly half of the Black newspapers today are published by women. Some of the daughters or some of them are daughters, some are widows of the deceased publishers, and we are keeping up with the times by offering not only printed newspapers, but also state-of-the-art websites and digital editions. We're on social media, producing digital broadcasts and podcasts, sponsoring events, and expanding our brands beyond by investing in other publications and growing offshoots of our own. Next month, on March 16, will mark the 195th anniversary of the Black press. I've often prided myself for recalling the fact that Samuel E. Cornish and John B. Russwurm started the first Black newspaper, Freedom's Journal, on March 16, 1827. Understand this. The Emancipation Proclamation declared the end of slavery in 1865, but it was the Black press that gave voice to the enslaved and the free men and women who were essentially left out of the anti-slavery debate. That's why they wrote in the newspaper's first edition, "Let us speak our own cause, for too long have others spoken for us." They were later joined by Frederick Douglass, who published the North Star in 1847, and dozens of other newspapers that were circulated before slavery ended. So don't let anyone tell you that Black folks couldn't read or write during slavery. Just this year, I have intentionally decided to make sure I recall the name of Mary Ann Shadd Cary, who on March 24, 1853, published the first edition of the Provincial Freeman, Canada's first anti-slavery magazine, and making her the first Black woman in North America to edit and publish a newspaper. There's no question why I can recall the work of men who published newspapers in what has been historically a male-dominated industry. But today we must stand up for the women, including Ida B. Wells, my shero, who were tough as nails in their determination to end slavery, and importantly, most importantly for them, to protect the Black family. I had intended really to close here, but I know I have additional time, so I just want to keep going a little bit and reflect on the words of my dad, whose mantra was, "If it is to be, it is up to me, and no one can save us for us but us." I'm going to say that again. He used to say, and he used to make people repeat it in all of his speeches, "If it is to be, it is up to me, and no one can save us for us but us." That's why he believed in building, protecting, and preserving Black institutions, including the Black press, the Black church, HBCUs, Black businesses, and especially the Black family. These institutions have carried us through generations, and we must value them by investing in them and helping them to sustain and grow. Regardless of what others may say or feel, Black institutions are an integral part of the fiber that makes America what America is today. Black people are the glue that is holding America together. When others mess up with all that they have, they look to us to see how we do what we do with so little. So when they ask us how it is that the Black press appears to be getting stronger, it's because we have stayed true to who we are and who we serve. We're truth tellers, justice advocates, community protectors, and positive motivators, and we serve everyone. It's the way we have always covered the news about our community, reporting on how, despite the odds, our community continues not only to survive, but to thrive. Today, they call it solutions journalism, not just writing about a problem, but focusing on how the problem is solved. That's been the focus of the Black press since its inception. In January, we were angry over the Senate's failure to pass the Freedom to Vote Act and the John R. Lewis Voting Advancement Act. And I helped to even coordinate the March on Washington in Washington, D.C. on the Martin Luther King holiday in January, and felt proud to march alongside Martin Luther King III and his wife and daughter, demanding that the Senate kill the filibuster and pass both bills. But believe me, no matter what the Senate failed to do or what the states are attempting to do, we believe believe that Black folks will turn out in the high numbers, not only in this midterm election, but in the general and other elections coming down the road. Nothing will stop us, nothing. The Black press will keep voters informed and aware of how to avoid the obstacles meant to keep us away from the polls and from voting this year and beyond. And as Marion Barry used to say, we can't give up, give out, or give in. Or as the Black National Anthem reminds us, we will sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Yes, we will sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. And on election day, for the midterms and the rest, we will face the rising sun of our new day begun, and we'll march on till victory is won. The Black press believes our mission is to keep hope alive. We have continued to do that. And I have to also give honor, I forgot to put this in my remarks, but when we think back over the life of a man who most of us knew nothing about until we witnessed his tragic death, and that was George Floyd. And the way his death, or that video by a young Black girl who taped what happened to him on those streets, changed the trajectory of America, and doors have opened. But they're not going to remain open long. And the money that has flowed from corporations to help our communities, to support our governments, despite a COVID pandemic, won't be flowing that way for long. And we'll have to go back to what we've always relied upon, and that's each other. And I'm not worried about that, because I know that we wouldn't have made it this far as the Black press had it not been for the support of Black readers, Black institutions, including organizations like yours. So I just want to say in closing, stay strong. Thank you for allowing me to spend this time with you. And let's go out now and encourage others to vote, to read the Black press, and to support our institutions. Thank you very much, and God bless.
Thank you very much, Ms. Barnes, for your very encouraging and timely statements. I wanted to take this opportunity to go to our chat and see if there are any questions for you within the chat. So I'm going to go to our chat now and see if there are any questions. And right now, Gina as well, do you have any questions for?
You know I do.
Okay,
So
we'll go ahead and let you start.
I was thinking of questions for you, Denise, as you were speaking, and believe me, I still don't understand why you did not think that you were exactly who I thought would be great for this, for all of the reasons I laid out for you. But you just proved that I was right, and I thank you. But I always have questions, and one. Okay, let me just go back in my mind because they were just popping up as you were speaking. One that I just thought of, something you just mentioned. Um, as a successful business owner and publisher, can you speak about the importance of supporting historically underutilized businesses, Black businesses, and how, and other minority businesses, but how the media can assist by employing what you just described as solutions journalism, to strengthen these businesses, to help them make connections with stronger, more established businesses that are coming into communities across this nation, even North Carolina, how we can do that and build up our Black communities, create employment opportunities for minorities, and all of that. Can you speak a little bit more about that? Because I love this solutions journalism. Hadn't heard of that before.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. And it's interesting. I didn't mention the fact that my two sons now are working with me here at the paper as well. And we have a growing millennial staff. So we're working on generation 3 now. But this generation is a lot more collaborative, I think, than we were, and generations past. I mean, we didn't necessarily share with one another our successes or our challenges. And I think the generation that I'm observing now is very, very collaborative. They want to know what each other's doing. They want to promote it. And they have a lot of vehicles by which they can do that. I mean, we've got social media, Facebook, Twitter. They're all on Instagram. They ran away from us. Oops, sorry. They ran away from us on Facebook. But, so they're very collaborative. And I think that's what it takes. I mean, those of us who run small businesses are so focused on the day-to-day operation of our businesses that too often we don't have the bandwidth to take advantage of all the programs out there that are meant to support us. And so we miss out on opportunities. And we have people who I think are in positions of power, elected officials, people working in government agencies, and what have you, who are trying to find ways to create programs that help, but that takes time. And so I think if there were a way, I want to give you an example. I am part of a national group called Word in Black. There are 10 Black-owned newspapers across the country, in DC, Atlanta, Baltimore, Houston, Detroit, and California. And while we are all members of the National Newspaper Publishers Association, loyal members, have served as officers, we have never come together and really sort of, as they say, peel back the onion and, shown each other or shared with each other the challenges that we face in keeping our newspapers alive. Some of us are second and third generation publishers, but we don't have those. We hadn't had those conversations until now. And we have so much to share with each other about how to make our newspapers, our publications successful. And so I think it begins with, those businesses, those like-minded businesses, people that are in the same industries, to use the resources that are out here, LinkedIn or whatever people use on social networks, to connect, to share the challenges, know that you're not in this alone, and to share, what's working and what's not working, to be able to talk to against those institutions that are making it more difficult. For us to get government advertising, we have to be certified by the government. The District of Columbia used to be the hardest place for a small local business to be certified, and you have to be certified in order to get government contracts. It has taken me almost a year to get my recertification in the state of Maryland. I mean, it's ridiculous. But so if there were others who were going through the same problems that we're going through, could get together and collaborate and talk to the powers that be in the state houses to say, you all have to fix this process if you in fact want to help your local small businesses, who are the basis of employment in the state, to be successful. You've got to fix this problem. So I'm not sure if I'm answering your question, but I think that it's important for us to talk to each other. We've got to do that. We are all we have. And no one is facing the kinds of issues that we face but us. And some have been able to break through, and some others are still struggling to figure out how. And the more that how to get through, and the more we, I think, uplift our community. There's a story that someone told the other day about a grocery store that opened, and another grocery store was opening across the street, and how that would hurt competition, except the grocery store owners found it to be the best way to drive business, because that way you have all of these people now coming into a community that might have choices that one store offers that the other one doesn't. But the point is, you're attracting all these people to one place. And that's what we need to do. We need to find a way to attract people to our community by just promoting who we are, using the institutions that we are, using Black newspapers, Black radio stations, our social media, which we do not own. So I'm a little worried about that and promoting that. We don't own Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and all that. And, there's some things that are going on now to try to, change how people use language on those sites. But the institutions we own, if we could gather together in those places and just say, I need your help, or I can help, I think gets us there. And this COVID situation has really, I think, opened up a lot of folks' eyes to that.
Yeah, you did answer my question, and you actually answered another one that I thought of while you were speaking. I was going to ask you if how your father influenced you. You've done that with your children, and if you see reflections of yourself in them, and you just answered that. So, Wendy, if you get questions in the chat, just shut me up, because I can call her and talk to her anytime. When I was a kid, Denise, my parents and my grandparents read the newspaper. That was just a thing that you just did. And my dad and grandfather, they would sit at the table and read the paper. And then after they had their coffee and breakfast and went off to work, my mother and my grandmother would sit down and read the paper. And I do remember them making us read things, and we couldn't look at what we call the funny pages until we read something. That has been lost over the decades, and I actually know quite a few teenagers that I've tutored and mentored in the past, and some I still talk to now. They've never read a newspaper. So I'm curious to know what you would say to parents and to grandparents or anyone who has involvement with young people. What would you say to them to get them to know the importance of involving young people in reading the newspaper and learning to love it and to use that as a source more so than just social media?
So there's a couple of answers to that. Number one, um, those of us in the newspaper industry realize that we are in a dying industry. And so it is incumbent upon us to make sure that we provide the kind of news and information that our readers want in a different format or in different platforms. You will continue, as I said earlier, you'll see us doing podcasts, digital broadcasts. We're on social media. We do newsletters now, digital newsletters. And we know that, most young people are going to grow up getting all their information from this. And they won't be seeing, I wanted to have a copy of the paper in front of me and I'll get that, but they won't be seeing newspapers as much. So it doesn't hurt my feelings so much. I don't take it personally, knowing that folks aren't reading newspapers, but until they tell us that it's illegal to kill trees, we're going to continue to print. But we have to make sure that we provide ways or tools in which will garner interest among the next generation. So I did a test here at the Informer because people used to say to me, young folks don't read newspapers. And I said, well, let me figure something out. So we created a publication called The Bridge, WI Bridge, of which my oldest son is the editor of right now. And in March, it will be 7 years old. And I do have this. And it's called, this is it, WI Bridge. It's a newspaper that's written for millennials, by millennials, and distributed to all the places where millennials and younger folks hang out. The campus of Howard University, we're doing Bowie State, we're at the clubs, we're at the restaurants, and it focuses on really what young millennials are doing in the what we call the DMV, DC, Maryland, Virginia. And I figured, and it's become true. You put them in it, they'll read it. They can read it online, but once they know it's in print, they want that print publication. And they want people to see it. And they're sending it to grandma and great grandma to say, look, I made it in the newspaper. So that's one thing we realized we have to do, and my son Lafayette is trying to promote this across some of the other publications in other cities across the country, so that there is a bridge. We thought, we called it the bridge, one, because it would bridge generations. Two, we're located in Southeast DC, and anybody that knows Washington, DC knows that the area where we are is separated from the rest of the District of Columbia, and it's connected by 4 bridges. We also know that this generation is very, multicultural, multi-ethnic. They share a lot of stuff. And so we're trying to bridge diversity or diverse parts of our community, and it's working. The other thing is we have teachers who pick up copies of the Washington Informer every week because of our Black Facts. And they want to share with their students in their classrooms those Black Facts and help them to know about Black history, not just during the month of February, but all year long. And then lastly, we picked up 2 other, what I thought were interesting little sections. It's 2 different pages. One is called Kid Scoop, and the other one is more African-centered. So there are 2 pages. that are geared towards younger children, elementary age children. So when grandma or mom or great grandmother is reading the Informer, if nothing else, they can tear that page out and let those little people sit down there and do the, read the jokes, the cart, fill out the blanks. I mean, it's a lot of learning that goes on those 2 pages, because we want them to grow up with that. And then lastly, that was last, but this is lastly, we'll be sponsoring our 40th annual Washington Informer Spelling Bee in March. 40 years we've been hosting the spelling bee for DC students, and now we also sponsor in Prince George's County. And our 2 winners go to the National Scripps Spelling Bee, which I'm sure everybody is familiar with, because one, my dad wanted to do that to make sure that there was more diversity among those winners. The sad thing for me is that while the public schools were so actively involved with the spelling bee in the earlier days, we're beginning to lose them, and we've got to find a way to get those teachers inspired to engage their kids, their students in spelling. And now we're getting more of the, the private and charter and other schools. But those are ways in which we try to keep the Informer name out there. But also, if they can go to the paper and learn new words, they get homework assignments. If the teacher gives an assignment and there's an answer to that assignment that you can find in the newspaper, that's one way. Of course, they can get it online, but they may not be able to get it online because, not everything that goes into the newspaper is online. So there are lots of ways, I think, that we are trying to, bridge what you're saying, that habit of reading newspapers in print for as long as we can, but we recognize that we as publishers have to meet our readers where they are or where they're going.
Thank you. Wendy said she had some questions, so go ahead, Wendy.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. I could just sit and listen to you with your answers, but I'm getting a lot of feedback from the chat. And I want to start out with this one because it's not necessarily a question, but it's a thank you. The words of your father, if it is to be, it is up to me, are so true. And he said that he will share them in the future to inspire others. The next question I have for you, though, can you tell us a little bit more about how and why your father founded the Washington Informer?
Yeah, again, it goes back to what he saw when he came to Washington, D.C. He had just gotten out of the service, the Air Force, and his brother lived here, and he came and he just observed what was going on in the city. And I think initially he at some point wanted to go into politics. And I think when he married my stepmother, she was the one that had the idea of a newspaper because of the publication, the Norfolk Journal and Guide, which was a prominent publication in the Portsmouth, Virginia area where she grew up. And being a lawyer, she just understood the power of words. So at some point, as this home rule movement was taking hold in the district, my father felt, let me go back too, because there were other newspapers that existed, but they were mostly social newspapers. They talked about, who was coming to the Howard Theater and kind of like, I don't know what to call it, but, really talking about the social scene in Washington. And there wasn't a Black newspaper at that time, although there was the Washington Bee earlier, that was published in the late 1800s by a man named William Calvin Chase, who had a powerful paper that existed here for about 40 years. But my father said, Black people need to see who's controlling this government. They need to see the faces of those people when they are going down to get their driver's license or trying to buy property, and they're, all the issues that we were facing in the city. These are the people that are making those decisions. And at the same time, he and others involved in that movement were trying to change those faces, bring on, I think the highest ranking member of the police department at the time was one sergeant. And it was their effort, that brought in the first Black police chief, the first Black fire chief, the first Black mayor of the District of Columbia, Walter Washington, who was appointed by Congress, but then we later got, we later got our first Black elected mayor, who was Walter Washington, and later Marion Barry. See, all of those things needed, all of what was happening in the district during that time, which was, oh gosh, the civil rights movement, what was going on in other cities and what was happening here, needed to be documented. We need to tell the story, he felt. And so his newspaper, along with the Afro and some others, were the ones that documented, one, put pressure, spoke to the powers that be, but also spoke to the community to let them know that they had power to change what was happening in the city. And the Washington Informer was right there, one, to be their mouthpiece, as well as their recorder, of that transition.
Fascinating when you're hearing about the history and everything that was going on, to document those things instead of going from like a griot format of where the story is being told orally, but you need to have something in writing, from a historical perspective of what occurred, and just to know that your family founded a paper that has helped to tell that story. That would, if I were you, I would just be extremely proud. And then speaking of that legacy, could you expand a little bit about, I saw that you started writing for the newspaper when you were in middle school. And so you had that close relationship with your father and started working for the paper at that time. Could you tell me a little bit more about that experience and how it laid the foundation for you to want to continue that legacy, or how it inspired you to continue that legacy?
Excuse me. So yeah, it's again, as I said, my mother and father divorced early, and when my father remarried, and this is family history, but everybody has some experiences like this, but I spent my summers with my father and stepmother, summers, holidays, and every other weekend. And so being with them in the summertime, their offices were together, his newspaper office and her law office. And, I'd go to work with them in the morning and come home with them in the evening. And so while I was there, my father actually gave me jobs to do. And one year, there was a girls' track team that was headed to California from the District of Columbia to participate in a women's AAU track meet. And my father asked the coach of that team if I could go along with them. But my job was to write a story about it. And I think at the time I may have been maybe 14. And so I traveled to Los Angeles with my tape recorder, my notepad and pen, and my sunglasses, and went to every track meet. And it was there that I got a chance to interview Wilt Chamberlain and Wilma Rudolph. And I don't know if folks remember these names, but some of the greatest athletes of all time were there. And even Bill Cosby, who was very, very supportive of sports, among young people. And so I just, actually the coach that I traveled with just shared some photographs from that period back in the, I guess, late 60s. And, I came back and I had to write a story. And then my father said, well, I want you to write a column for the paper, because he always believed in having a youth writer. And another person had started doing that. And then he asked me to do it. And so I called my column The Junior High School Scene, and I wrote about things really that went on in my junior high school, although I have friends in other schools. And I would talk to them on the phone sometimes to figure out, what are you all doing over there? What can I write about? And it's interesting because in 1968, as you know, with the assassination of Dr. King, and everybody can remember just about where they were on that date or when they heard the news. And I believe I wrote about that, but what really hit me the most was after that. That's when there was this demand, almost like what we've gone through over the past 2 years, that Black history is taught in our schools, that every student needed to know about the contributions of Black Americans. We couldn't let our history die with Dr. King's assassination. And so we had a Black history instructor, so they gave me more to write about. And then when I went on to high school, as creative as I could be, I changed my name, the article column's name, from the junior high school scene to the high school scene. I didn't write as much then when I got to high school. But I did write a column every now and then. And to be honest, Lisa and Gina, one of the things that I've done with my sons, I started this early on. If they had an experience in school or in the community, 2 Black boys growing up in DC, I would make them write about it. And I wanted them to write a publishable account of their experience. And sometimes I published it. And I've done that with a lot of young people. And that's another way. You asked earlier about, making sure that you'll get kids to read. But, our kids have so much on their minds, so many things that they're experiencing, so many thoughts about what they're experiencing, that we should encourage them to write, and if they write and feel comfortable with their writing, and we don't criticize them for being poorly written, but help them to shape it and to make it, read better, because we want to support that. And then go to your local newspaper and say, look, this is something my son or daughter wrote. Can you publish it? 9 times out of 10, we'll do it. Because we have editors too, and we don't want to change the language, but we can help. And so, I think that that's what my father did with me. And I will be honest, completely honest, to tell you that when I graduated from high school, the last thing I wanted to do was to come and work for the Washington Informer. I had no intentions of coming back here to work with my father or with this newspaper. I'd done it all my life, been there, done that. But I got into college, started out in political science. I wanted to be a lawyer like my stepmother, do international communications law, go off into the world and make lots of money. That was my plan. But there was something about journalism and media that kept pulling me back. And helping me to discover where where I was most comfortable and where I thought I could do the most. And as I said, it wasn't until I got to Howard Law School and became editor of the newspaper there that I understood not only the power of the written word, the power of communications, but also the power of ownership. And I may as well have owned that newspaper, because the law school didn't support what we were doing until they realized the power of what we were doing. And I brought that back here to the Washington Informer.
So earlier you mentioned something about someone wanting to purchase the Washington Informer, and someone had a question about that. They wanted to know if you thought that the passion to fight to keep your newspaper open would have been the same if based on your personal connection to the paper versus outside connection. So if you didn't know that they would want to make adjustments to it or do certain things to it, do you think that your passion to keep the newspaper open would have been the same?
I'm gonna, well, I want to say yes. The time it was so, we were struggling so much at the time. We were really, really struggling. And you know, I couldn't get the printing bills paid. I couldn't pay people. There was just no money flowing through the Washington Informer, not enough to keep us alive. And it's really funny because, well, not funny, but I mean, even I might write a check, right? And tell somebody, look, this check is not good. You can't just hold on to it till I can get the money to pay for it. And you know, you can't tell people that. They're going to go right to the bank and try to cash a check. And so they would go to this liquor store down the street that was owned by a Korean liquor store owner. And it almost got to be to the point that he was my bank, because he would call me and he'd say, Miss Denise, you know, I've paid two of your checks this week. Don't worry about paying me back until you get the money, right? And I mean, I love this man. My father was dead then, so I couldn't go to him, but Mr. Yu used to help me out quite a bit. And so it was really, really that bad. And I'm so glad that I was able to pay him back, you know, regularly. We had a great little money exchange going there. So when I heard that Don King had bought a paper in Cleveland, and that he was looking and interested in buying a paper in Washington, D.C., I mean, I thought, okay, this is my chance. You know, I can pay off everybody that I owe and go on. And but and I'll tell another story, because these stories mean a lot to me, and I appreciate Mr. King for this, because when I went to meet with him to talk about the paper, he was getting ready to promote a boxing match. And he said, okay, let's go to lunch and let's talk. And I said to him, well, I had just gotten the phone call. I said, Mr. King, I can't go right now. I have to go to the bank and pay the printer. There was no money in the bank. I couldn't pay the printer. And the printer told me, if you don't get us the money by noon or 2 o'clock that afternoon, they weren't going to print us that week. So I don't know. I can't hide my, you know, my face says everything. And I couldn't hide it. And he looked at me and he said, do you have the money? And I said, well, you know, I can, I'll be okay. And he said, you don't have it. And I said, I'm okay, Mr. King, I'll be fine. He peeled off 20 $100 bills and put it in my hand. And he said, as soon as you pay your printer, let's get together and have lunch. So I did. I took the money to the printer, came back and met with him, and was so grateful to him as well. But, you know, I said, he sees value in something that I've lost. I've lost, you know, I've lost the ability to fight for this. I'm ready to let it go. And to be honest, if he had offered me 10 cents, I would have taken it for the paper. But then as I looked into, you know, figuring out, well, how do I value it? And he said, whatever you do, don't ask me for $1 million. And, you know, I mean, there's a lot of things I had to go through. And the more I went through that exercise, the more I realized that this publication had value. And that if I really fought for it, you know, I wouldn't want to ask somebody for what I could get. I would want what I thought we deserved, for the name, for the sweat equity, everything we put into this. I didn't want to give this publication away. So, you know, as fate would have it, we met another couple times. His lawyer, I would call him and he would just, I'm just, as Mr. King made a decision, as Mr. King made a decision. And he never made a decision. So I made a decision. I'm going to go back here and work my butt off. And I'm going to save this newspaper, and I'm going to make it the best newspaper I can make it. And, you know, the rest is history. We're still here. And that was, God, about 20 some years ago. Again, I don't know if I answered your question, but that's the story.
That's amazing. And it's so inspiring, because you hear the stories of Black entrepreneurs and their struggles, and, you know, the things that they go through when they're working to serve the community.
Yes.
And I just want to say thank you for staying committed to doing that. And I have another question here. It says that as they're a product of the HBCU, I am as well, and I've always had to defend my knowledge, skills, and abilities within the workforce simply because of the stigma that HBCUs are not on par with PWIs. So they wanted to know, what do you recommend that we do as a community to break the stigma that's attached to HBCUs?
You know, I wish I had some words of wisdom for that, but you know, we get that not only from others, we get it from ourselves. You know, we don't even respect our own institutions or our own, you know, people that have our own people. So, you know, it's not one of those things I think that just has to come within. Did I win based upon what, you know, the effort that I put into this? Am I giving it my best? Can I do better based upon your own, you know, evaluation of yourself? You know, we know when we haven't done our very best, and it can't be, we can't satisfy everybody. It's just not going to happen. And in this country, until somebody waves a magic wand and racism and sexism and discrimination and all those things are put to an end, we're going to always face that. So, you know, you just have to, I sometimes you know, one of the things that happens here at the Informer, you know, we'll write a story about somebody, be the first to write it and write a great story. But when they become, if you go look at their resume or their LinkedIn or what have you, they won't even mention us. It happens all the time. But I'm not deterred by that because one, we've got evidence that we've done it, right? So we can show that we were the first. But you know, I just I don't have an answer for that, and I think it's, but don't internalize it. That's all I'm saying. Do not internalize it. HBCUs have produced some of the greatest. We talked about all the HBCUs right there in North Carolina and the STEM, science, technology, and engineering folks that have come out of those HBCUs. And if we get enough of us in the right places who value from whence we came, you know, that people won't say Howard as if they're saying Harvard, you know, because they want to confuse people. You know, just you know, just don't let that deter you. That's all I got to say. Just don't let it deter you. I don't know really how else to advise you because it's been going on. You know, we remember our parents who always talked about, you know, how some Black folks believe that the white man's ice was colder. You know, my dad used to tell that story. You know, he sold ice in the Black neighborhood, and then white man started coming through the Black neighborhood selling ice, and people stopped buying ice from him because they thought, you know, the other guy's ice was colder. That's just something that's been with us forever. And so feel proud of your HBCU, support your HBCU, donate to your HBCU, give opportunities to those that are coming behind you from your HBCU, and you know, wear your you know, whatever we wear, your sweatshirts, whatever your paraphernalia, wear it proudly, and don't worry about what other folks think.
I'm getting a lot of feedback, more so than questions. I mean, that's great too, because everyone is saying that it has been an amazing event, and they really are taking in answers that you're giving from your perspective. It's so inspiring. That's one of the main things I'm hearing. But they wanted to say that they don't even really have a question. They're really thankful for you coming today and sharing your time and experiences with us, because you know, just seeing that the paper, that it's gone through the civil rights era up until now, and it is adjusted through all of the changes that have been made in the media, and it's still going, it's still thriving, and it's just great to hear how those things have affected your family, of course, and affected you, and of course, Black History Month, because the Washington Informer is definitely a part of Black history. So we're just glad to have you here today to talk to us about the paper and the effect of Black journalists on the media. And again, we just like to say thank you for coming in and giving us your words of encouragement and the history again of the paper. Gina, do you have any other questions or comments at this time?
I do. I just have one comment and this last question that is perfect to close it.
Gina,
I just want to say,
Gina, before you start, I'm sorry. I have a very important question for you. How do people get a subscription to the Washington Informer?
I would ask you to go to www.washingtoninformer.com. You can sign up there, or you can actually call us now at 202-561-4100. Angie Johnson is right there by the phone waiting to hear from you, and she can take care of you. That's 202-561-4100. And I also wanted to say my son just came in, who is the editor of the Bridge, and I wanted to, if you don't mind, can I introduce him to you as well?
Sure. Of course.
Lafayette, this is, we're talking to folks at the EEO in North Carolina. This is their Black History Month program, and I was talking to them about the Bridge and talking about legacy a little bit.
Good afternoon, everyone. Oh, good morning, should I say. It was afternoon right now. So good afternoon, everybody. How are you?
Everyone is doing well. We just had a couple of questions for you. Gina, do you have some quick questions for him as I'm getting the information out?
No, I actually, well, he could probably answer this too. I had the question for Denise, but he can go ahead and share whatever he'd like to share, because he's a part of that living history now.
Why did you do the Bridge?
Certainly. Well, so, I grew up obviously in the Washington Informer. So as a young person, I was here, meddling and probably annoying everybody, as a child. But, being able to observe all the, the business and the impact, community impact that was happening here. As I developed as a person, into graphic design and video and some of the multimedia capabilities that are necessary for this type of business, I just thought like this would be the best format and platform for me to be able to share some of the skills that I had gained. And so one of my cousins and I, we basically decided to start a blog called The Bridge. And sooner or later, my mother ended up, allowing us to make it a print publication. So I don't know if she showed you all, but this is like our latest edition of The Bridge. It's what I call the millennial facing product of the Washington Informer. And so we tried to reach younger people through, interesting graphics and, imagery and, just creative storytelling, and not necessarily the traditional, news sort of format that you might be used to, which I think has been working. A lot of my age group and younger, I'm 36, and, there are people that work with us that are like 18. And so, they really enjoy being able to be a part of a print platform, as well as see it on the social media and, just understand that it's part of this historic, culture, and being able to continue that historic culture as legitimacy, to some of the things that they're working on, and sort of gives them context for, just creating value and understanding what the value is of what they're doing. I don't know if I'm just went on a tangent or a ramble, but yeah, I just sort of walked in here. So yeah, please, any questions, feel free to ask.
A good ramble, a good tangent.
Okay.
It's some of the feedback I'm getting is that it's great to reach all ages in print. Do you have cartoons in the paper?
We do. So it's not, we haven't, so yes, we have a cartoonist that we work with here. And there are a lot of young people that are into, illustration. And so we try to, give them a place to put that in print. So we do have cartoons in the Bridge. It doesn't happen every month, but, we try to make sure that we get it in as much as possible. one thing about some of the younger people that we work with is, they're still finding their place. And so they might have an idea that we love to, like I said, give them a platform to express. But because they're, looking for jobs and they're, in school and, their schedules are just changing often, sometimes the consistency is an issue. But certainly we try to give them a place to do that. So we have had cartoons in the bridge to answer that question.
Black History speech.
And this is a little bit of feedback as well. I noticed that between the time that I started reading up till now, my son, he really enjoys graphic novels and he loves graphic novels. How do you take that type of format and add it to the Informer, or do you consider that format for the Informer or for the Bridge? Because I see that young people really take to that.
Yeah, so one of the young men that we were working with, his name is Nate, and he produces his own graphic novels. And so his cartoon was, we gave him a full page that consisted of basically 9 different frames, and it was basically a graphic novel that would be based on the topic of the month. So our paper, instead of the Bridge, instead of it being like, the hot news or whatnot, it's really just, we try to have a theme each edition. So we could say business, or we could say housing, or we could say, music in the city, whatever the case may be. And so he'll create a graphic novel, a short, I'm sorry, not a novel, but a short, 9-frame cartoon based on that topic. And so he, like I said, he does produce graphic novels. And so the style of illustration that he was producing for us was similar to what a graphic novel would be like. And he's actually working on a larger graphic novel now, which we'll support when he's ready. So I think graphic novels are great, a great way to tell stories and to reach young people. And even if you can make it, a video, an illustrated video, animated illustration, that's another great format.
Do you have any other questions or comments?
Do I have any questions, or do you? Nope. Yeah. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. I really appreciate being able to talk to you all today. You can, learn more about the Bridge on our website, wibridgedc.com. We also are on social media, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, at that same hashtag or that same, name, wibridgedc. And feel free to reach out to me. Once again, my name is Lafayette, and I'm happy to be able to speak for you all today.
Wendy, I just have one question in closing, and then you can wrap it up with the thank you. This question, well, first a comment. This question is for you, Lafayette, and your beautiful mom.
Okay.
You both, just in what you've shared in the short time you spoke, and then what she shared, I can tell the comment that you're giving people a glimpse of a much broader and more accurate segment or spectrum of Black life. And for that, I commend you. I think that's just amazing. And there should be more of that. So my question for both of you is, what do you think, Denise, your dad, and Lafayette, your grandfather, would say about where the Washington Informer is today and what you're doing with it? And then that's all I have to say with my thank you. And I will mute my mic to hear your answer. And then Wendy, you can take it after that.
Okay, so I'll go first, since once I get up, she's gonna take the helm. But I would say that, unfortunately, I didn't really get to spend a lot of my adult life with my grandfather, so I might have a lack of context for his mood or attitude. But but some of the things that I do remember about him is, one statement that he makes, which is, if it is to be, it's up to me. And so I think he would be proud that, we are continuing his legacy, and that we have taken it, we're still at the center of the mission, of continuing his legacy. And another thing I know about him is that he was very well known. A lot of people, he's a social figure here in DC, and so that's something that I've learned to take advantage of. I have frequented a lot of different circles here in my age group and younger, and I try to make that something that is an asset to our business. And it's worked well with the bridge. A lot of the stories that we cover and a lot of the, artists and collaborators are people that I just meet in person, and they happen to have these skills, and I'm able to bring them into the fold. So I would hope that those two aspects of his legacy are things that I'm making him proud with. And here's my mom.
So thank you, Lafayette. And anybody who knew my dad knows he was very demonstrative and with his words. And I could hear him saying now, Jesus Christ, Denny, are you still doing that? Because, I don't think that he thought the paper was going to survive. He went on and did other things, before he passed. He started the United Black Fund. He was beginning to do a lot of work globally, and particularly on the continent of Africa and the Caribbean. And so, I think he had great hopes for the publication, but I don't think his expectations were that I would continue here or that the paper would continue. So like Lafayette said, I think he would be very, very proud, amazed, and I think he strengthens us every day from where he is to continue on the work and the legacy, because he knew how important the work that we do is to our community. He loved, the community. He loved Black people. He loved all people, but he felt as though we needed to be the ones that were at least to be the voice and the messenger for our people. And so we're striving to continue to do that, and I think he'd be very proud of it. And thank you for that question.
Barnes, again, I am just so glad that we had you here and your son Lafayette to come on to give this presentation today and to share with us the history of the Washington Informer and the history of as well as your family. It's definitely a part of Black history, and you all are living history through this paper, and we'd like to say thank you for that. And some of the comments that I'm getting is that I'm sure that your father is proud, very proud to see that you're carrying on the family's legacy, and your that his grandchildren are also carrying on the legacy. And so with that being said, on behalf of the Office of State Human Resources, I would just like to again say thank you for having you come out to speak with us today and share with us about the Washington Informer and the WI Bridge. We will definitely look that up, and I am just very, very excited that we were able to have you. And if anything, sure.
Wendy, I'm sorry, just in closing, because I mentioned the Black newspapers in North Carolina. If you don't know, what that publication might be in your city, please look them up. Let them know. You can say Denise said call you. You want a subscription, or you want to find out, how to share information. You want to know how to support those businesses that Gina talked about earlier. We're here in Washington, D.C., and we are so grateful to have this opportunity to speak to your audience there in North Carolina. But please don't forget your home newspapers. There's several of them there, and some are struggling and some are doing well, but they're all trying to do the same work that we're doing here in Washington, D.C. So please support the Black press in North Carolina.
Yes, and with that being said, we have a list of all 10 of the papers, and we've compiled that list. So when we send, this event is being recorded, and it's going to be available on demand. And when I get the information out for this event, I'm going to provide that list. I'm going to provide the on-demand link so that people can watch this program again and share it with other individuals. And we'll also share the names of all of those papers and include the Washington Informer on there and the phone number so that they can get a subscription with your paper as well. And again, we would just like to thank you for mentioning those papers here. And we will be sure to get all 10 of those papers mentioned, on that list, so that people can look into those papers as well. And I think if anything that we've learned today, in the words of your father, we should all live by this mantra. If it is to be, it's up to me. So it's up to all of us to make things happen or be. So I'm just very excited that we had you here today. And again, thank you. This will conclude our Lunch and Learn session for Black History Month, and it will be available on demand. So definitely look to see this and get the information about all of the other papers and the Washington Informer. And be on the lookout for our Irish American Heritage Month program and Women's History Month program. You will get information from me about that. And again, thank you to Ms. Roloff Barnes for participating in this program today. Thank you.
Thank you.